since we're already starting a couple minutes late, I'll probably go ahead and jump in. Before I get started, does anybody have anything specific that you would like to chat about today? Anything that you want to know about? Or do you just want me to sit up here and talk, which for those of you that know me, I can do pretty easily, but I'd love to answer any specific questions that you guys have. Anybody have anything specific? Feel free to unmute yourself. Or you can also put it in the chat. Allison's on here. She'll be monitoring the chat for me. So if anybody has any questions but is too shy to interrupt me, you can put it in the chat. So, all right, sounds good. Well, I'll go ahead and get started since you guys are all so talkative today. I'm going to click into the slide here and get rolling. Maybe. Share screen. You guys just want to look at my calendar? We can do that too. All right. All right. So hopefully you're here for the April real estate update. Who am I? I'm an agent here in Central Ohio. I've also been a team leader of a Keller Williams office. I have a team called the Marsh Home Group. We are looking to add agents. So that's my shameless plug. If you are looking for a team here in Central Ohio or you want to move to Columbus, don't judge us by the weather today. I promise it was 80 yesterday and it's supposed to be 80 again before the end of the week. I'm also a real estate investor. So right now we have 15 rental properties. I've worked with a lot of different investors. And then I'm also a real estate coach with I Love Coaching. You can follow me at my Instagram or Facebook handles I put down there. You can also feel free to reach out to me via email, which we'll throw in at some point today as well. So yeah, you can, like I said earlier, you can definitely feel free to throw stuff in the chat as well. So what are we going to talk about today? So for those of you that have been on before, but may have missed last month. Maybe I've been doing it for 2 months now, but I've kind of switched things up a little bit to make sure I usually get a decent handful of people who are coming from other markets other than Central Ohio. So what I'm going to do is go through the national trends, talk about interest rates, which are also pretty national, talk about ways that you can talk to your clients about the current market. And then I will release all of you if you don't care about what's happening in Central Ohio and jump into the more specifics with regards to Central Ohio. So that's kind of going to be the setup for today. And like I said, feel free to interrupt me. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can always throw stuff in the chat and Allison will be monitoring that. So jumping right in, lots going on in the real estate numbers world. If you guys have been either jumping on here or read any predictions throughout the year, you know, really we were supposed to have a pretty rough year in real estate. And I think it's going to potentially be a rough year for real estate agents. But in terms of what the typical buyer and seller might think of as a rough market, all signs are pointing to almost all of the predictions of that not being true. And that's largely due to low inventory. So we're going to jump into a couple of those indicators and see how those are what I call leading indicators. So the new listings and then the active listings are kind of like a foreshadowing what we're going to see in terms of pendings and solds. So jumping into the active listings here, we can see that they are up almost 60% year over year. And these again are national stats. So, you know, you may not, depending on which market you're in, be seeing that big of a rise, but this is also keeping in mind some places in the West and South who are up. I think the South, and we'll get into this in a minute, is up over 100% year over year. But you can still see what I like to pay attention to are the pre-pandemic numbers as well. And you can see that pre-pandemic numbers, I'm going to actually get laser pointer here. The pre-pandemic numbers, which are all up here, are all way above where we're currently at. And that is what is keeping the market pretty strong if you're a seller. So obviously you can see when active listings, they're up compared to last year, but they're trending downward. And so what we're seeing is we're seeing a pretty sharp increase in terms of pendings, which if you look at pre-pandemic is kind of what we would expect. But you can see the number of pendings is much lower than it's been in 20, 21, and 22. And now, because of the lower number of new listings and active listings, in March, we saw a smaller increase than actually we've seen at any point over the last 6 years. And so this is something that we're going to keep an eye on. And that's why I say it could be a rougher year for real estate agents, because obviously all of us have to sell homes in order to make money. And when homes aren't selling, even if the homes that are selling faster and for more money, it's typically not enough to make up for a large drop in the number of homes that are actually selling. So that's what we're going to be kind of getting into here. So you can see newly listed homes. So if we go back here, these are the active listings. So the number of properties that are currently for sale in the market. But if we come down here and look at new listings, we are far below the lowest place that we've been. So we're about 20% off in March, year over year nationally. And so if this number continues to be significantly below, I think what we're going to see are those active listings coming back towards historical lows, but we're also going to continue to see the pendings and solds dropping. And as we've talked about, and we'll talk a lot more about, homeowners just have not been willing to sell that 3% rate to buy a 7% rate. But one of the things that we've seen is that as rates have ticked closer to 6%, sometimes dipping below that, that we've seen more buyers entering the market, but there are no houses for them to buy. And so this, I think, will continue to be an issue. Because there are no houses to buy, the days on market are continuing to drop. So even though we are up 18 days on market on average compared to last year, you can see that we're still well below the average days on market for pre-pandemic. And my prediction would be that this number is going to keep declining and potentially rival last year if we don't start to get more new listings, because what's going to happen is a lot of those homes that have been sitting on the market are going to get purchased by buyers who are now entering the market in the spring. And because there are no new listings, they're going to be forced to look at the old listings. And so as soon as you start removing those houses that have been sitting on the market for a long time, obviously your average is going to continue to go down. Our median list price, and this I would say has been the biggest surprise. I mean, I'm a data nerd, as you can imagine. That's why I teach, present this class every month. But I think the biggest surprise of the year so far for experts has been that although no one was predicting, most people weren't predicting a housing market crash, almost no one was saying that home prices were going to rise year over year. And now this is the listing price. So the next slide, we'll see that sales prices, which is really the most important part because that's what the sellers are actually getting, have gone down some, slightly. But this trend line kind of being at or above last year, it was definitely something that was not anticipated, especially after things had slowed down so much in the fall. But the lack of new listings has absolutely just kept supply and demand off, meaning that there are just a lot more buyers than there are sellers. And so because of the limited number of options for buyers, it continues to push pricing up. And for those of you here in Central Ohio, obviously we'll get into that in more detail. And I have the most anecdotal experience in Central Ohio, but we are seeing large numbers of multiple offer situations, especially in the sub 500,000 range. And sometimes seeing kind of the craziness that was 2021 and 2022, or at least the first half of 22. So I would anticipate that we'll probably see pricing continue to tick up, probably not substantially over last year, and it may even peak a little bit lower than last year. But certainly as we move into the second half of the year, the conversation about year over year, is it up or down? I think we will, by probably August, if not before then, we'll see the year over year numbers be increasing again. That being said, I think probably for the next couple of months, probably now through July or August, we will see year over year prices less than last year, which will be a headline that you will have to battle. And so understanding how to describe what we just talked about is going to be an important conversation point, because the national news media and the local news media, as you know, love negative headlines. And so when they can say that prices are below last year, and that news is probably going to be coming in conjunction with news of a recession of some kind, which again, we'll get into more in a second. Those two things combined are going to be leading to a lot of negativity around everything economically, and housing, since it impacts everybody the most, since most people spend 20 to 30% of their income on housing, that's going to be a conversation point you're going to have an objection handler to. Otherwise, you will leave business on the table this year for sure. I went ahead and copy and pasted this from realtor.com, which is where I pull all of these data points, just because for some reason they do not create a graph for the average sales price. They only show the median list price, which not everybody, which we'll see in a second, some people have to reduce their prices. But the national median sales price declined on a year over year basis for the first time in over 10 years in February. It was only 0.2%. But that number is important because housing, as we've talked about in months past, housing has a very large impact. It's the most impactful piece of the consumer pricing index, which is commonly referred to as inflation. And that's what the Federal Reserve uses to kind of decide whether they're going to continue raising rates or lower rates. And because housing prices, which is largely based on rents, but it also does factor in home purchases, those are both turning negative. Obviously, housing did in February. And remember, those lag a month and a half behind, which drives me insane, but it's the way it goes. And so those going negative will help to bring down the inflation number. It's not going to lower your grocery bill, but everything thrown in that jar together, housing has the biggest impact, and therefore will drop that number, which is what the Fed is looking for. So they will stop raising rates. So even though the year over year number is down a little bit, I think we're going to continue to see the prices kind of going up, just not at the same rate that they were last year. All right. And then again, price reductions, they had been definitely a trend. They have leveled off though from February to March. I think we'll continue to see that level off and maybe even continue to decrease if inventory stays low. And we're still well below those 17, 18, and 19 numbers. So it's just not what anyone expected at the beginning of the year in terms of the housing market. Regional comparison, I'd love to look at this because obviously all of us are in different markets. We know that even within our regions and our cities, there's sub-markets in there. But looking at the national data is very statistically relevant from the perspective that there are a lot of homes that are factored in. But looking at the regions, I think, is just as relevant. In the Midwest, and then surprisingly the Northeast, I've been kind of surprised that the Northeast has been so resilient. They actually are now, in my opinion, the most stable market, even over the Midwest, which the Midwest had been kind of leading them. But active listings are still significantly lower in both the Northeast and the Midwest compared to the South and the West. You see your median listing price is still up in every region, but that the percentage is decreasing over time. And then days on market year over year is definitely getting closer. And your price reduced share is still best in the Midwest and the South. So again, just keep that in mind. I don't know about you guys, but we've been getting a lot of people relocating here from other states. And I actually don't have a slide on this. I kind of ran out of time as I was preparing. But one of the things that I just saw over the weekend was the federal government actually sent out, I don't know, whatever they call their official letters. But the federal government employs a lot of people throughout the whole country. Not just, obviously, the majority of them are in the DC area, but everybody has, courts and FBI headquarters and Social Security offices and all of that kind of stuff. And the federal government sent out a letter at the end of last week, essentially saying that COVID is over and that they would like to push to get as many people back into the office as possible. And the reason I think that that's significant is for a couple of reasons. Number one, a lot of people kind of said that the work from home thing was here to stay. And because of very, very low unemployment or very, very high employment, employers have kind of been handcuffed to a degree to give workers whatever they wanted in terms of flexibility and working from home and all of those things. But I think when you looked at the polls of the actual employers, a lot of them would have preferred that people come back into the office. I think your telemarketing jobs and some of those where they've actually can get rid of office space, maybe will stay remote. But I think what they've seen is that productivity has trended downward due to the work at home. And so with the federal government saying that they had kind of been the biggest proponent of work from home, stay safe, all of these things, with them now reversing that trend and potentially a recession on the horizon, which could cause unemployment to go up and put a little bit of power back on the employer's side of the table, which hasn't been the case in many years now. I think that we could see a pretty significant reduction in people and companies that are allowing work from home. And what that's going to do is it's going to force unfortunately, Columbus, Ohio hasn't been a destination for people that wanted to work from home. And so I think you're going to see some of these areas like the Northeast, maybe even California, who lost a ton of population during COVID, but also northern states in general, who lost a lot of people to western and southern states, start to regain some of that lost population when people are forced to come back and work from the actual office. So those population trends are going to be extremely interesting to watch, in my opinion. And I don't know that there's enough data out to have anything to say other than it's going to be interesting. But it's going to be interesting, I think. And we could see, if you're in an area that lost a lot of population to some of those warmer climates, maybe, or more desirable climates, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And conversely, if you're in one of those areas that grew a ton because of pandemic workers moving there, the West grew a lot because people moved from California to Montana and Phoenix and all of these other Texas, where they're more favorable from a tax perspective and all kinds of different reasons. It'll be interesting to see if some of those markets really get punished, if there's a large percentage of people that have to move back to where they came from just a couple years ago. So interest rates, I would say interest rates are the news, and I've been saying this for several months now. And I think you guys would probably all agree. So after increasing for a large amount of February, which you can see here, we have trended downward, but they've been very volatile, as you can see. I mean, even compared to the rise in February, it was pretty consistent. And then the fall of rates in the fall and early winter was pretty consistent. We have been seeing these huge upswings and downswings basically on market data. And unfortunately, today, it doesn't look like it's a great day for rates. And I think we're going to continue to see this probably through at least the beginning of next month, when we expect inflation data to come in significantly lower than it's been based on what year-over-year housing and rent numbers look like. So I think that we'll continue to see this month be pretty volatile in terms of interest rates. But a lot of it is going to be what the Fed is forced to do to try to slow the economy. Like I said earlier, employment is the one thing that just is being extremely stubborn in this market, meaning people just are not losing jobs at the rate that they anticipated, and therefore everybody still has money. And so it's really difficult for inflation to go down when people have money to pay the higher prices. Obviously, if inflation were to continue rising at the rate it was last year, you'd reach a point where even people that have jobs can't afford it, which is what the Fed is trying to avoid. And unfortunately, until some people start losing their job and things become and demand drops due to those job losses, we're probably going to see inflation stay pretty stubborn. So it's going to be interesting to see, but the Fed seems unwilling to stop raising rates until employment starts dropping. So that doesn't have a good feeling for anybody, but it's just the reality. And if you dig into what they're saying, they're not being shy about that, or they're not being shy about it. They're coming out and saying we expect people to lose jobs, and until unemployment rises, we expect to continue raising rates. So they've gotten in several fights publicly with Congress over that for obvious reasons. All right, so mortgage payments, again, I've been showing this slide for several months. I think from a talking point perspective, though, this is super, super important to understand, and you should have some sort of objection handler for this, that payments are up. I mean, a $300,000 loan is up $540 a month. $600,000 is up over $1,000 a month. That's real money. And in many areas, because of price increases, they're essentially buying the same house that they live in for more money and then a higher payment. And so you have to get quite a bit higher in prices. And so you might be going from a $300,000 loan to a $500,000 or $600,000 loan. And so that difference just becomes a lot of money. And with economic uncertainty, that's really what's keeping people from moving, therefore not putting their house on the market. And that's the issue. Now, the one thing I will say is that if you're looking for new clients, this is the place that you need to be looking. The reality is that everybody has life happening. People are having babies, they're getting divorced. Unfortunately, people are dying. And all those things are life changes that kind of force the sale of a home. I think we could see some smaller investors that have purchased homes start to sell because cash flow doesn't make sense. but that kind of remains to be seen, because then if they don't have anything to do with that money. I did listen to a podcast last week, and the big institutional buyers, again, depending on what market you're in, you may or may not have them. We have like America's Homes for Rent is really large here. They own a lot of homes. None of them at this point are planning on selling, and none of them are really selling any of their inventory. They're anticipating that rents will continue to go up, which I agree with them. So they're holding on. All right, so the next couple slides are going to have to do with becoming the local economist of choice. I've talked about a couple things that I think that you need to be focused on when you're communicating with your clients. But here are a couple more things that I really believe you guys need to understand as agents, and be able to explain. And it does two things for you. One, obviously, it helps move people forward. When people are fearful, they tend to do nothing, right? So when there's uncertainty, they tend to do nothing. So your job as a salesperson and or an agent is to create enough confidence in them that you know what you're doing and that you would not steer them wrong in this market. And if they feel confident that they're making the right move because you say it's the right move, then they will probably move forward. If you go in and don't have any answer for any of these things that are going on in the economy, the chances of them feeling comfortable moving forward are going to be much, much lower. So, question, is the Fed done raising rates? So basically what this graph is showing you is this is all economic data over the last kind of 3 weeks. And this is the expectations for what the Fed is going to do with the rate. Now, our rate right now is like right basically down here at 0 at like 4.75. So now the Fed has come out and said they anticipate one more quarter point rate hike this year. So their words say that we're going to be in this area. However, the market, based on economic data, kind of bets whether or not they're going to be raising rates. And as you can see, the market has no idea. It's all over the place. But based on retail sales data last Friday, the market really feels that, in combination with the jobs report, which was better than expected, those two things have them believing that the Fed is probably going to raise rates one more time. I think their meeting is in May. Their next meeting is in May. And so, yeah, it says right here in the middle of the screen, Troy, how many of you are laughing at me because I'm acting like I know something and it's right here. So Wall Street thinks so, the Fed thinks so, and the more data that comes out in support of it, the more I think so. I think that they're going to try to do this ahead of the inflation number that comes out in May. In order to save face, they're going to say they didn't know about it, but I think this will probably be the last hike. And depending on how the next couple months go, we could see a really quick turnaround to rate reductions, even as soon as the beginning of the fourth quarter next year. But obviously that depends on how soon things slow down. The Fed is saying that they're not going to lower rates again until next year. But I think that could happen because, in my opinion, and the opinion of many economists, I think that the Fed is overdoing it, just like they overdid stimulating the economy up until last year at this time. I thought this was just an interesting number, so I thought I'd throw it in here. This just came out this morning, but the National Association of Home Builders says that 1/3 of housing inventory is new construction. That's insane. The average is around 10%. So that's literally like 200% of normal. I know in our market, we're feeling this, and I'm sure many of you are too, just with the low resale inventory. So I've been talking about being the local economist of choice. Here are a couple of my talking points in addition to what we've already talked about. I think if you walk away with nothing other than this talking point, you could be good. This and the next one, though, are really important. So does a recession mean falling prices? For every millennial buyer that you have to remember that 2008, and I'm going to highlight it, circle it, whatever, but 2008 is the only recession that they ever have known as at all. You know, millennials, for the most part, were still kids at that time, and many of them were young kids. But they do not know a recession without housing prices going down 19.7%. The reality is, though, is what you see on here, and that is that almost every recession actually does not equal a housing correction. The only other one that did nationally was 1991, but it was only 1.9%. It was nothing significant. For the most part, you've seen prices rising. I like to point to this as a good indicator because 1980, the recession was caused by inflation, which is basically the same reason why the recession that we're probably in or going into was caused by inflation. And I like to say everything else can't be going up in price except for housing. So the chances of housing going down is low, but let's look back at history for more support in that. And here we are. I mean, in multiple situations, housing did not go down. So that's one thing. For those of you in Central Ohio, I just threw this up here as a local kind of idea. You see in 2001, actually, in 1991, we were still up here in Central Ohio. And certainly in 80 and 81, we were up a lot more than even the national. We were down less in 2008. And then in 2020, we were up 6%. So obviously, local numbers are going to definitely vary, but for the most part, this is going to be true across the country. This is the second piece that I wanted you guys to walk away with, because this is a question that I feel like everyone has. Even some of my smartest clients, I feel like, don't fully understand this. And maybe many of you don't understand this, but the difference between the Fed funds rate and mortgage rates. So the Fed funds rate is what the Fed, when they say the Fed's raising rates, that's the Fed funds rate. The thing is, though, the Fed funds rate, although 30-year mortgage rates tend to follow the same general trend, the 30-year rate actually more closely resembles the 10-year Treasury. So you can see as the Fed funds rate is like it goes up all at one time because the Fed makes the decision on one day and then it stays the same until the next time they make a decision. You can see the 30-year fixed mortgage rate goes up and down all the time. So the 30-year is much more in tune and in line with what's happening day by day than the Fed, who looks at months at a time and compares even to a year ago. So, and remember, the Fed funds rate directly impacts your shorter term lending products that are based typically on prime. So you can see prime pretty much follows the Fed funds rate. And those are things like car loans, home equity lines of credit, credit cards, pretty much anything that's variable or less than 10 years is governed by the Fed funds rate. Mortgages, which are more than 10 years, tend to follow the 10-year Treasury. However, you can see that even though the 5/1 ARM is adjustable at less than 10 years, it tends to more closely resemble the 30-year fixed mortgage rate versus the Fed funds rate. So just remember, Fed funds rate equals short term, 10-year Treasury equals long term, and no one sets the 10-year Treasury except for the market. So just remember that. So that's another way. So you can go read up on that. All right, my opinion on the market. I think low inventory will continue. I think as an agent, new construction relationships need to be a top priority for you. And I think the low inventory is going to continue to keep things very competitive. especially in the first-time home buyer price ranges, whatever range that is. The reason being is that a lot of the buyers in the market are going to be first-time buyers because people, as we've talked about, that have homes to sell are very reluctant to sell due to not wanting to trade out their low rate. And so those homes that do come on the market, depending on what price point that is in your market, in our market, it's around 500,000 is where you start really seeing the first-time home buyers disappear. I think it's going to stay very busy. Interest rates, I think, will settle somewhere, hopefully in the low to mid fives. It could be the upper fives by sometime this summer. It could be sooner. It could be a little bit later. But what we're really looking for with interest rates more than anything is just consistency. Because right now, the lack of consistency is making buyers' payments go up and down. And with the low inventory, it's like they could put an offer in this week on a 450 house, and then next week rates go up, and now they can't put an offer on anything over 400. It's very unnerving for the buyers and really leads to uncertainty, which, like we talked about earlier, uncertainty and fear equal lack of action. And so a lot of buyers, if this continues, may get fatigue and just step out of the market. Recession is becoming more and more likely based on the Fed's insistence on getting inflation down using leading indicators instead of lagging indicators, meaning they're not giving their previous increases time to show up in the economy. So I believe that they probably have already, but certainly are going to overcorrect. And it's probably going to lead to a little bit worse recession than what could have been had they been a little bit more patient or started this whole thing sooner. But that's a conversation for another day. I think that areas with increasing population should see little to no impact due to constricted housing supply. I think if you're in an area that's in neutral or declining situation with regards to population, or potentially areas like Florida, who are highly dependent on second home buyers, could see a larger impact, or areas where you had a lot of COVID movement to those areas that could be, like I said, forced to move back to where they came from due to their job, if there are fewer jobs available to be had. The last thing I wanted to highlight were the importance of lender relationships. I think that with the volatility in interest rates and also just the changing economic climate, it's going to be super important to make sure that you have a lot of lender not a lot, but at least several good lender relationships. All lenders are not offering the same rates anymore. And your client having the right lender could mean the difference between them getting a house and not getting a house due to, again, a fluctuating interest rate. So make sure your lender's keeping you up to date on product changes, interest rate changes. And I would recommend at least one relationship with a local bank that has a portfolio product to keep you competitive in the market. So that is the end of my national portion. Sorry, guys, I went a little bit longer than normal today. However, definitely have a lot going on. I feel like the housing market is in a really weird situation right now. There's a lot of press that just isn't in line with reality. So before we jump into the local market, anybody have any thoughts, questions, comments before we jump into what's happening in Columbus? Nothing in the chat. You guys are like all asleep today. Anybody? Kendra, you got on. I just saw your text, so that's good. All right. Well, I'll jump into Columbus. For those of you, Karen, I don't have numbers on agents leaving the business, but I could definitely include that for next month because it's a thing. I think NAR puts it out. My prediction, though, in general is going to be that this year is going to be a big year where we're going to see agents losing the bigness, leaving the business. You know, again, because sales are going down. I mean, we saw that at the end of last year, but I really anticipate that being stronger. And I would anticipate with the negative press on real estate that, to your question there, we will see a lower number of new agents entering the business. And there's actually a graph in the Shift book written by Gary Keller that shows the number of agents in the business historically, and then when that drops, and the opportunity for market share after those drop in agents. So yeah, I'll bring some of that info. That's a great little topic, some new info I could throw in. Best resource for local market, that's going to depend on your local market. Megan, are you in the Columbus market or are you somewhere else? Southern Indiana. What's up, Megan? I do not actually know down there. I use Trend Graphics. Oh, Charlotte. I use a program called Trend Graphics that we have with our office, which you'll see in a second. But I also know Altos, ALTOS, is available. They actually have some amazing data. I'm thinking about going ahead and paying for that. I just haven't had a chance to research how much data I can get, but I know they give zip code data and it's really, really good. Like a lot of experts actually, I think they got bought by Housing Wire or something like that, and they have really, really good data. A lot of it you can't really find anywhere. Realtor.com, actually, it's lagging, obviously. But if you go to realtor.com, let me jump to this last slide real quick. This website right here, this one, that every month gets updated by like the 9th of the month. And if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, they actually do go city by city. They don't have graphs and all of that stuff, but they do show some of the numbers. And then Redfin also has a pretty good data graph building thing. I haven't found their data to be super accurate though, which doesn't make any sense to me, but that's just, it is what it is for some reason. So let me get back to that slide. So hopefully that was helpful. I appreciate you guys jumping on all the way from North Carolina and Southern Indiana. I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the Columbus market since we're bumping up against time here. So local market, large drop in new listings year over year. It's offsetting the slowing of the market. Like I talked about nationally, the number of sales are down enough that we're seeing in March, we saw for the first time since August, the number of solds was more than the number of active listings. And I think we're going to be back into that arena again, that we're going to continue to see the number of solds be higher than the active listings. You can see that new listings, March over March, were down 20.9%, which is just insanity to me. And that's obviously going to be a leading indicator, meaning that's foreshadowing what we're going to see in the market here over the next couple of months. So unfortunately, we're not going to see a bunch of new sales. So new construction versus resale, always interesting. You can see the new listings month to date. I'm sorry, this is quarterly. Sorry. The new listings for new construction are, I feel like I have the wrong graph here, the wrong numbers here. Sorry, guys, I'm a little bit thrown off. So you can see new listings and new construction were down 27.3%, but the existing listings were up 58%. So very similar to to our resale numbers. So we're not seeing that same impact on that national level, but we are seeing a lot more new construction being a larger percentage of our market, just given the fact that resale is continuing to decline. So sorry for the confusion there on that slide. This is looking at resale only, March versus April, and then April month to date. Not good numbers here. If we look at March compared to April, we can see that new listings in April are actually down compared to March, which is not a good trend. Typically, as we move into the spring season, we see more and more new listings, and we just have not seen that this year. You can see March month to date is down 27% compared to the first 2 weeks. April month to date is down 27% compared to just a year ago over the same period. So we're going to continue to see, unfortunately, these sold numbers continue to drop on the resale side. So if you have buyers looking and you're not considering new construction and they can afford new construction, I would highly, highly recommend looking at new construction. That is and then that is all coming out in terms of the limited inventory in the sales price to original list price. You can see back here last spring, we were in that 99 to at one point 105% range. We dropped as low as 96% here. And this is going off of solds, remember? So this is what we call our lagging indicator. I would not be surprised at all if in April we see this number go back up to 100, maybe even jump to 101, just based on my experience right now, that it seems like most properties are going at or above list price, and some of them are going substantially above list price. Remember, again, days on market is a lagging indicator because it's based on solds. As we work through some of that old inventory that came on the market in the fall and didn't sell right away, we're going to see the days on market higher, I think, than what is truly happening on the ground with a new listing that you put on today. So make sure that when you're looking at a listing and you're talking to the seller about how long it's going to be on the market, make sure that you're paying the closest attention to the in contracts in the neighborhood and how long those were on the market before they went into contract, instead of just going down to the solds and looking at that average, because that tends to be a lagging indicator. We see that in months of supply. I mean, we're nearing year-long lows here. We were down last March as low as 0.4 months. And I would anticipate that, given the number of new listings, we're going to continue on that same trend for this year. The new build inventory has dropped significantly since January. Part of that is I think the builders stopped building a little bit back here when the market slowed. And so I would anticipate that we're going to continue to see this number drop. I do think the builders are starting to feel more comfortable, as that news article said, from a confidence perspective. And so hopefully that changes. Ignore this. I forgot to update that number, but obviously inventory is 1.7 months now in new construction. So average sales price. So again, we're still up year over year. And from February to March, we saw a 3.7% increase for the sold price. I would anticipate that month over month, we're going to continue to increase until we see more inventory. But as we enter the next couple of months, just like I said, on the national level, we could see inventory. We could see the average sales price go negative for a couple months. If it does go negative, it's probably only going to be through July. Let's see where our peak was. Our peak was in June last year. So I would actually anticipate that our July number will likely be higher. I'm sorry, I was up there. Our July number will probably be higher if I had to guess, than 339. But we likely will. My prediction is we'll go negative, maybe as soon as this month, but certainly by next month. And then we'll start to level out, and we'll either be positive by July or maybe August at the latest. That would be my prediction. So again, that conversation we had about talking to our clients about why that year over year number is not important. The biggest way to combat that is, yes, year over year prices are down, but month over month prices are up. And so that means that every month that you're waiting, the chances of getting that house for the same price go down. And so that would be my talking point there. All right, that's all I've got. Hopefully that was helpful. Here are my sources. Please feel free to reach out if you guys would like a copy of these slides. Can have Allison send them to you. My email is troy@marshhomegroup.com or troyre@gmail, either one of those. Or you can put it in the chat here momentarily and she'll grab it. But I am going to be jumping off unless anybody has any questions. Does anybody have anything to add? Any questions? Any questions about scripts, how to have the conversations, any of that stuff? You guys are quiet today. This cold weather, huh? All right. Well, I will let you guys go then. Thank you again. I'll keep this on for just another second so that you guys can grab my email address there if you need it. And then I will see you next month on, did we decide it's the third Monday, I think, of every month. So I'm actually going to be compiling a list of everybody that's asked me for slides in the past, and I'll send out like a special email to you guys to remind you. I know a lot of you guys are awesome and come on every month, so I truly do appreciate that. All right, awesome. Well, have an amazing day. Hopefully you're selling some houses. Go get some listings and let me know if I can do anything to help. See ya.